Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
Synctank.
My God, where do we even start? Like crabs in South America, or transvestites in Colombia, or condoms in Gaza? It's just a sexy, racy week. I feel like it's a good time to be alive. I want to start with the trans Colombian president story. So the White House, you guys heard this, that, Colombia had a plane show up with two planes, two American jets, right? That flew in with a bunch of pedophiles and rapists, right? Like, whatever. Like, sorry, I know we're 2 minutes in, it's early. But like, we brought all these criminals that were just in sanctuary cities. We're like, we know that you're like taking young teenage girls and holding them down and accosting them, but you're not like from here. So that's cool, I guess. We're just going to keep protecting you. And finally, they're like, no, let's get rid of them. And if we're going to get rid of immigrants, let's, like if we're going to get rid of persons of color that we have racial problems with, let's be honest, some of these people might like seriously hate, somebody. Let's start with people everybody can hate. Like this is something that we can all agree on. It doesn't really matter what color you want. It matters that you're like raping and murdering, right? Anyway, two planes.
Oh, they got him.
I believe we found out exactly where the line is. That was almost that was a great example. So we appreciate that, powers that be. This is new to me. So do we have any more context about this? I
go way too strong just now. Was I going way too hard?
We actually saw like a little warning sign show up and everything that was like, you will get cancer if you watch this.
It's true. I might get arrested here. I don't know. Those things you're not allowed to talk about in Europe. But long story short,
I guess
criminals
you can get anywhere.
Dude, we should bring that up later. Actually, I did just read a story about the Vienna police swatting essentially people. However, it seems like they don't.
Oh shit! Now they got his burner account too.
So we're finding out Vienna might be a little bit more strict than Germany was.
I don't know. This might be bigger than that.
Even have a camera. That's where we're at with this.
Okay. He's on his burner.
There was a kid recently that they like swatted in Vienna because he bought drugs on the internet, but they ended up releasing him at least right away. I'm pretty sure they're going to like eventually use him to get through to some online web store that he's been working with, simultaneously to Trump pardoning the Silk Road kid, which we have to talk about as well. I just wanted to bring up that the president of Colombia sent back the planes. America dropped off two planes with criminals. They were trying to fly them over Colombia, and they said, you need to take back your criminals. We don't want to have them here, right? You know this story. And then the Colombian president said no, and he sent them back, right? Like he said no to Trump, which imagine, when I get angry as an American, I don't like it when other people say no to me. So I can only imagine how Trump felt. And he ended up Lord God Emperor style saying he's going to raise tariffs 50% and go full mafia godfather on them with a fedora, and said he's just going to charge. It's going to cost you if you want to have your choice. It's going to cost you. But then all of a sudden, the president of Colombia, he's in all sorts of new media publicity for being, he's got a transgender. He's got a fetish for transgender people.
That's very
at least one, So
at least one.
I don't know if
the
that's
alleged
aesthetic necessarily, but he has a thing going with this one.
I assume passing, like unquestionably passing, right?
No, you
Colombia,
could at first glance you wouldn't necessarily pick up on it. Yeah, but I mean, if you're that guy in train spotting, you'd get fooled until you go out the car.
I mean, it's nothing new for a politician to have a transgender lover, Obama. But I'm just saying, this character. I mean, it's just kind of funny that like this is now going to probably destroy his career. He did, within 40 minutes of Trump threatening tariffs on Colombia, immediately apologize and send his own jet, his own private.
It happens so fast.
Jet.
Everything's going okay there. There was just like one, like you say, like there's a brief window of time where it's like, oh shit. And as soon as that happened, AOC just took to the keyboard warrior thing, and she was just very concerned about the price of coffee. Like that was her primary issue with the whole thing, was like the price of coffee is gonna go sky high.
She's a barista because she watched a lot of Seinfeld growing up, and she was a barista. Like she's not actually like a politician. You have to remember her background.
Right.
However, I mean, she was like, but I commented on that post of hers though, because it triggered me, because as a Mormon. So I was just basically because she said in the post.
Oh shit.
Oh, did she?
Mm-hmm. I thought it was supposed to get better. Andreas is moving around. The last location he was at, it was stellar internet. This is the problem.
There's lots of broken promises from Europe. It's not relegated
broken
to just
promises and broken internet. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Well,
are you at a hostel? What's happening?
No, I mean, but they sometimes treat me hostilely in Austria. I think it's all the coffee. So to punish Colombia, Trump is about to make every American pay more for coffee. Remember, quote, we pay, or asterisks, we pay the tariffs, not Colombia. Trump is about making inflation worse for working class Americans, not better. And so I said, not every American. Mormons don't drink coffee, right? I think that's
that was an underrated response right there.
It is a very fascinating point. Although I'm a bumpkin in this, right? Like I barely paid attention in school enough to graduate, but I did. And I do remember that the concept of tariffs at their heart isn't necessarily, it's going to raise the money on coffee that comes from Colombia, but that just means that all of the distributors and manufacturers, everyone that ends up getting it at like a large commercial scale, they just switch suppliers to the next country.
That's right. It's like
$10
exactly. More. It was like when Obama bailed out GM, and it was just like, oh, thank God. It was just like, what would that have done had he not done that? It would have meant that all of these, lesser manufacturers would have been able to have the opportunity to come up, and it was a monopolized market. So whenever you have a monopolized market, you have the person at the top, and then other people work their way in. So, but that's not what's going to happen anyway. This is just like a theoretical, and it felt like a very Trump-like thing for her to do. Like she's kind of is that other side, like
she really is
bizarro world Trump or something. Because she her response, like the capital letters, now it's going to make it worse. It's all like trying to freak people out. That's my concern with AOC, is I feel like it's just like this kind of like hysterical reactionary thing. It's just like, is that helping? Is that what we need in our representatives? Like,
it's the only way that I believe that you can truly talk to people at the scale that they are talking to people. She's no longer this individual barista that's taking your one individual order, right? Or even addressing the entire bar of patrons. Now it's such a large, massive audience that truly it's just almost like a practicality that you have to rile people up in order to inject your message. Like it doesn't just happen at the same one-on-one level. I mean, this is classic Gustave Le Bon style, the crowd education, that almost everyone should be familiar with this from like early 1800s, right? We've got at least 200 years to have gotten caught up on this, and this is just the way that you talk to a massive amount of people.
Yeah, you need that because what it does is it's a fight or flight thing, so it encloses the mechanism of processing. So you're just like your attention span gets totally narrowed in the fury and
You know what else could do this? If you just randomly take away everybody's coffee in the mornings, it would almost have the same effect as like reducing somebody's like cohesiveness. They would be more apt to be part of that like crowd that is fiending for caffeine, that they could now be just as controlled. I don't know. I feel like she has an upper hand on this particular issue for that reason.
Right.
Isn't it also sort of historically the same as taking cocaine from weekend warriors?
Why can't we have coca tea? Why? I mean, I understand because it's a precursor to creating actual cocaine, but still, we should, just like there's yerba mate. We've got alternatives to coffee, right? You've got all sorts of different ways, and
cocaine is a much healthier alternative to coffee. I'm not a medical expert.
100% agree.
I want my Coca-Cola green again, and I want there to be a reason for that. You know what I mean? Like that was actually wasn't that an old Elon Musk tweet at one point where he was just like, "Can we put the cocaine back in which was coca?" Let's be clear, it wasn't technically cocaine. It wasn't like the refined cocaine.
Well, but it was an extraction of. It was an extraction of coca, and so it was a lot stronger than just chewing coca. There was definitely
was it?
a lot. Okay. It was a lot closer to. In fact, they supposedly still make cocaine from Coca-Cola, right? The extraction process in the United States, because cocaine's not illegal in the United States. It is legal. It is Schedule 2. We have scheduling systems so that Schedule 3 means you're not allowed to use it. Schedule 1 is more clear. Schedule 2 is for pharmaceutical and dentists, right?
Wasn't that the racist Biden thing where he like wanted the crack cocaine to be a higher schedule drug than the powder cocaine? And you would argue that it's kind of maybe more of a class issue.
In retrospect, that could have legitimately been the result of like a little tiff that he was having with Hunter at the time. Like, I swear to you, I will make crack so
in
hard.
In the
80s? I mean, it's a very real possibility that there was an internal. There was an internal issue going on within his family that spawned some of that rhetoric, and it wasn't just for regular political bargaining chips.
Oh, I always assumed it was the other way, like I think most people would, that it was just that was Hunter's way of rebelling against his dad, was his insane drug laws. Like,
but this is them just like upping the ante, bit by bit. Like Hunter's like, "Oh yeah, Dad, well I'm going to do crack," and then he's like, "Oh yeah, well I'm going to make crack inaccessible to you," and he's like, "Oh, I've got a lot of money," and it kept going up.
Well, I have to repeat this thing where it's like that just maybe there's new listeners, but this was the first time I ever heard of Joe Biden was when I saw him on the television. Maybe late 90s, early 2000s, whatever that was, where he said he wanted to arrest the promoter, quote unquote, of raves. And like raves were like at that time, like my salvation. Like that was like, I was just like, wow, you can like just dancing in the therapy of that. And then he was like,
door moment.
And it was Footloose. So he was the villain in Footloose. And I was watching this guy on the television saying that he wanted to like, he said, I know where these parties are happening. They're happening in warehouses and they're happening in the desert. And he said the desert. And I was like, at that point, I hadn't been to Burning Man. I've been to Burning Man 8 years in a row later on. But I had friends that went to Burning Man. I was like, you want to arrest the promoters of Burning Man? And I was like, who is this guy? He's the freaking villain in Footloose. And then when it was announced that he was going to be Obama's running mate, I was like, that guy, the villain from Footloose, is going to be Obama's running mate. And then immediately I was like, okay, I get it. This is to let all the rich, I mean, I don't need to put race into it, but come on. I was like, this is to let all the rich white people in America know, yeah, we're going to have a black president, but don't worry, we got you. So they had to have this Colonel Sanders guy. And then I was like, and then he ran on that on his own, like later that was like, oh, well, I was with Obama. So I'm, like it was just like, it felt like.
I just want to point out that if you try to ask Grok to make a picture of David Plate, because of the amount of pictures you've put up of Lucy Lovelace, this is what it thinks you look like now.
That's awesome. I only put up one picture of Linda Lovelace. Is it Lucy? Is it Linda? I can't even think right now.
I'm sorry. I just like the idea. I just like the idea of this being you more than I should.
It's a Nixon reference, just so you know. And I like that it says X marks the spot. But yeah, no, because Deep Throat. Come on, So there you have it.
Fair enough.
Well, I want to go back to the coca before we let this go completely off of the hook here, because I was actually fortunate enough to almost need coca when I was in Peru, and I mean I'm a Florida
Same.
boy, right? I've been conditioned to like sea level sort of lifestyle and this like thick salt
And
like humid
to the
air.
idea that cocaine tastes like baby laxatives and amphetamines, right? Like there's a reason why you don't want
Right.
to.
So, but I mean, going to Peru, it was like I couldn't even breathe barely until someone was like, "Oh, just do some coca tea," and every single little corner had a little coca tea place. You just go in there, and it tasted great. It was like the best combination of tea and coffee combined. You would just grab bushels of it and chew it, and it opens up your capillaries, and it just functionally makes it so much easier to exist in that particular climate. So of course I just stocked up and probably spent more on coca leaves while I was there than most other sort of ways to nourish myself. But it was so functional, and I don't remember blacking out or doing anything crazy. And I've been down.
I
that
remember
road
blacking
too.
out. Actually, that was my version of the story. Is that I was blacking out because I refused to do the coca tea. I was like, no. I don't want the baby laxatives and amphetamines taste. I don't know what it is, but if you associate something, you're not going to want to do it. So finally, after I'm laughing and really quickly trying to cross the street before a car hits me, I like rush across the street. I'm winded at Sucre, and Sucre is 13,000 foot elevation. It's like very thin oxygen. I faint essentially because of the lack of oxygen. So then they're like, dude, why haven't you been listening to us and doing like when in Rome, and you're like, okay, so you do the coca tea and all of a sudden you're able to have oxygen. It's a lifesaver to keep you black out from not doing it. That's interesting.
Is it technically legal here now? I mean, I live in Santa Cruz.
Absolutely not.
Not yet, but South Park kind of predicted that it will be.
Look at the law, because it says when they passed the law for plant medicines, that you're like, and it would be if you did another step in the process, I think it would become illegal. I don't know if it's technically illegal as it stands, because we included cultivation in Santa Cruz, unlike Berkeley and a lot of these other places. We said you have to be able to cultivate.
The federal government classifies coca leaves as Schedule 2. So unless it's not even cocaine. It's
federal law. Okay, fine. But what do they have as mushrooms? Is mushrooms a schedule anything?
And I think that it would have been really interesting to have an argument about like what was the federal government versus the Declaration of Independence of Sovereign Confederated States. What's the rights of California? That would have been an interesting conversation.
Right. Well,
up until Gavin Newsom didn't handle the fire, and now everyone's
I'm not
like,
even talking about California.
I'm talking
about Santa Cruz specifically, because California is one thing, but we passed our laws for Santa Cruz.
We have decriminalization where police are not able to bother you about certain things. Like, sure, it's illegal, but we can't arrest you for committing a crime. California, right? Brilliant, isn't it?
The first time I ever had coca, like green, like real with the lime, I was at Burning Man. I was dead tired. I'd been up for like 2 days, and a friend of mine was like, "Come on!" Like it was the morning, and he was like, "Come on, this person's playing. We're good." And I was like, "Dude, I gotta crash." I was like, "I am spent," and he was like, "Oh, have you ever had coca before?" I spent the rest of the day just feeling it just changed my whole reality. It's great.
Oh, at the same time, it is very mild. It's not like doing a rail.
Let me just confirm the point here that you just made. So, Schedule 2 in the United States decriminalized in Santa Cruz in 2021 the possession of entheogenic plants and fungi. So, including coca leaves, psilocybin mushrooms, other natural psychedelics. There are some caveats. Decriminalization in this context means that the law enforcement of Santa Cruz has deprioritized enforcement of laws against personal possession. It does not mean it's fully legalized. It's still Schedule 2 in the federal government. But, it's interesting that they're literally the state or the town could say, hey, we're the ones who have to enforce these laws, and we're going to choose not to enforce those laws.
Right. Yeah, well, it was a last-minute thing that happened because people were looking at the wording. We have a lot of psychedelic activists here. I mean, we have maps here with Rick Dublin and all of that. And they caught it in the text. They were like, it doesn't say anything about cultivation. They're like, it was last minute, and they're like, you need to include this here. So as far as I know, we're the only place in the country that includes cultivation in that.
I think Colorado will follow suit, because the thing is, I remember the South Park. I recently watched the South Park about this, where cocaine is legalized, and Santa Claus is constantly trying to stop cocaine, probably because he had baby laxatives and amphetamines when he was young. But, he's like, all right, you have to make cocaine legal. He's like, yeah, I can do that. Just give me a minute. And he goes out and he does the same thing they did with marijuana. They, say criminalization of drugs is drug laws are racist. The war on drugs are racist, right? And eventually they're able to make cocaine legal. And what are some of the benefits of doing that? Well, it completely cuts the cartels out. No more criminals involved because it's not worth their time, right? It's not all of a sudden someone else can do it cheaper, so they're not going to be involved anymore. And there's licensing. No more people dying because you're not killing people. The cartels aren't killing people. The drug trade isn't killing people. And people are getting drugs that are as safe as they could possibly be. So they can't really blame because the purest possible thing possible with medicinal measurements and everything like that.
And plus the market, I want to shoehorn in here too that once that becomes legal federally, like you're not going to jail over it. Now the market is allowed to participate in that process, which further refines that. Now it's not just it won't hurt you. Now it's like which one has the absolute least amount of side effects that I'm willing to deal with at this price point. And that's something that the government will never be able to allow, or it'll never be able to do that itself. It can only allow other people to come in and fill that role.
We need to cut out the middleman. We need Santa trying to explain to Jesus why you gotta try this. That's that's the best clip ever. Really? I think it's interesting that I like how we've just started this off with going into Colombia, and now we're just straight. What has it been? 10 minutes of talking about blow.
I
mean, you cut out the middleman, so that's what we're doing.
Straight to the source. I don't know. We could continue to talk about cocaine. We could also talk about AI. I think AI is kind of interesting too.
Well, I think final pro for cocaine is that it will allow many people to achieve their magnum opus, which they otherwise maybe wouldn't have. And I almost like a lot of work, whether you like him or not, Sigmund Freud, I would almost assume that
Vienna.
A lot of the writings that we have of him are these long, 72-hour streams of consciousness that he later refines, but the cocaine in a practical sense allows someone that's working at the top of their level to continue working at that top of their level for 3, 4, 5 days straight, which does give you some things that get added to humanity, which I would argue are much stronger than even the worst that cocaine takes away from us.
You keep using the word refine in other contexts as you're talking about
beautiful.
Coke. I have a copy of Cocaine Papers. It's amazing. That's from Freud.
Fish scale?
Yeah, well, continue on that point in a second, but just also that cocaine is not mentioned. I mean, they talk about the word of wisdom for the Mormons bans tobacco, coffee, alcohol, never mentions cocaine. I'm just saying there's no rule against it for being a Mormon, so that's fun. Not technically, not on technicality.
This is why they work so well with the cartels.
If there's a disaster, isn't it a rule that you have to share it with your neighbors too?
Because
what about
South American Bolivarian socialism? Sure enough.
Are they okay with meth or I mean, okay might be a loaded word there.
Dude,
is it
the intellectual reserve? The problem with the Mormons is they pay a bunch of they invest in pharmaceutical companies, so they have all sorts of justifications if a doctor says it's okay. It's here, let's get a secular doctor to say it's all right to take opiates. Right. Okay, I mean, or antidepressant psychedelics or anti-schizoid SSRIs or whatever. I don't know. All that's kind of a bummer. I think your point, though, about the cocaine papers is interesting, that Freud was addicted to cocaine in a city where it was a waste of time to go to school because the Jesuits were kind of affronted after the 19th century, after the killing of Mozart. And the Freemasons, the Illuminati Bavarian are not as essential. Now you have these sort of dystopic coffee shop culture. And now it's, you go to a coffee shop here and you can't smoke inside. So it's kind of like hell. You know what I mean? It's like where you're standing up to your knees in shit holding a coffee cup. It's these clean places that doesn't feel right. But coffee culture was a place where people smoked, drank, took whatever substances that they had and listened to each other chat. I mean, coffee culture was better than any university could ever be. It was a lot closer to what social media conversations were. I mean, you'd have all the craziest people in the entire city would go to a coffee shop, get wound up and talk about, social managerial theory and authoritarianism and religion and Nietzsche,
Right, but you'll know by its fruits, and you can see the difference in what happened with Coke over time, because what Freud was able to do and what Chevy Chase and the cast of SNL was able to do is much different than what Phil Collins eventually ended up doing. Like there was like eventually, like in the 80s, like if you look at what Coke was doing in the 70s versus what Coke was doing in the 80s, it tapered our pants. Coke should never have tapered our pants, and you can see the effects of unclean Coke in acid wash and tapered pants. I'm just saying, and like elastic, like around your waist, like for pants. What were they?
Well, arguably, and I say this in a unironic way. At a certain point, it became all about the money, man. Like, I don't know that at the exact moment when the cocaine papers were being produced, I don't know if cocaine was entirely about the money at that point. I'm sure it was profitable, but it wasn't necessarily at the same levels that we're talking about Phil Collins era, 1970s.
I think it needs more reverb, guys. Put some more reverb in it.
Pretty sure, pretty sure cocaine. Oh, that's another thing I was thinking about. Like cocaine for Freud was probably pretty much pure. It wasn't amphetamines mixed with it. There were no baby laxatives. So there is a big difference. And I think most people have never had real, I mean, I hate to say it like that. Like, even if you've had cocaine, 90% of the cocaine is like not actually cocaine. It's poison.
Was he getting excited that when it shows up and it's like, oh, it's got a scorpion stamp on it? That means that it's like, there was no concept of, oh, that's the really good one.
No, because he would go to the exotic plant shop. So there's an exotic plant shop you would go to, and then that's where they would buy all sorts of strange things. Where they get like,
was that on campus?
Well, and then he would walk around Vienna. Like my mom sent me a message recently. She's like, and Freud every night he would walk around the ring of Vienna. I'm like, Mom, I know he was on a lot of coke though. Like I can't afford to walk around the streets of Vienna like Freud, but he had access to like medicinal quality pure cocaine because it was out of Ethnobotany. And recently I'm walking around Vienna and I see they don't have cocaine plants yet, but I'm sure they will because they have marijuana plants here. And I was like, wait, marijuana is legal? And they're like, well, we can't tell you exactly like about the plant like they can in California, but if you want to buy a plant for decorative use, the exotic ethnobotanists can sell you marijuana plants for decorative use. And looking at it's like it's a marijuana shop, looks exactly like a California shop, but every plant is for decorative use, and they're just allowing it to happen. Meanwhile, they're arresting people because there's some people part of the right-wing government or whatever arresting people that have like 300 plants in their apartment. So it's very late 90s. It's very much like it was in California.
Will Morgan makes the point that Wilhelm Reich was anti-Coke, which would make sense.
He was a Pepsi guy. Yeah.
Well, because the thing with Coke is it affects your your sex
libido.
Your libido, which is interesting in terms of Freud's whole trip, because there seems like there's kind of an issue there. Maybe the water.
Interesting. He's a sexually frustrated
old MDMA guy. Reich would have been all about ecstasy, you think?
Maybe he probably would have had issues with it with the serotonin factor of the receptor sites. Like he probably would have been like, whoa. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to know what these people, if they're in the context of later.
I think the point is that they love drugs. Isn't that the point? They just love drugs. They were drug
addicts. They had their taste. Yeah,
maybe. Although I think that there's something romantic about the utilitarian aspect of it, where it wasn't like for all of the cases that I guess we're kind of focusing on, escapism isn't really among the top of those. It's more of a yes and, not a like instead of. You know what I mean?
We're not escapists. I think that's important. It's weird that people seem to think that, it's escapism. I think a lot of these people are not into escapism. And it's particularly fascinating, the stimulant drug addicts, because they're like, wow, I'm really good at what I'm doing. I want to do this more, hotter, faster. And so they're, the coffee thing that Americans especially, but around the world, that people justify being addicted to coffee, a drug that kills 8,000, 10,000 people a year die from cardiac arrest just because they drink coffee. It's the only drug.
I think ALC just outed herself as a total coffee addict. She's like, oh my God, what am I gonna do?
But also, like, look at the price of her dress, dude. Her freaking pantsuits and things are like $20,000. She's wearing like a lot of money. She's
wearing like the rich dress that costs like a fortune. Wasn't that there's something about that?
Yeah. No, she's like a Gucci ad. She's like one of those like magazines that smell like perfume. Like you look at all the numbers of everything she's wearing. It's crazy how expensive her outfit is because she's supposed to be a barista, But okay, like that's the thing about most of the left-wing communists. I think
I
that's
mean,
the point
is
of the
not
left-wing
Starbucks one
communist
of the
thing, is that
largest?
you look like $1 billion.
Look at how much money and power Starbucks have. They rival the Mormon Church, so they can afford all sorts of nice outfits, I would assume.
A lot of Mormons work in Starbucks, though, which also kind of confuses me. I don't completely understand it. They don't drink the coffee; they just sell it. It's like the mafia, you know. They don't do the drugs; they just sort of let the kids do it. I
There's
guess
such
I
thing
don't
as
know
a
what that's about.
contact high with coffee. What if they're brewing some real strong stuff? I mean, sometimes just the smell alone can give you a little bit of a I don't know, maybe just like a recollection of the last time you had coffee.
Sure. It's like smelling DMT. You get a little like, ooh.
Maybe that's what I think. I think a lot of the Mormons do that on purpose. They're like, I'm gonna go like hang out with sinners and tax collectors so that I can be pious. Yeah, right, bro. You want a secondhand high. You want contact high. That's what you're doing.
Did we conjure AOC through the sigil magic of Starbucks? Was that the big secret? Like the way that Starbucks?
Oh, because she's a split tail. So
Yeah.
I think it's more of a portal. Like AOC is the first one to come out of that portal.
I think there's something to that.
I'm not against that.
Bernie Sanders drank coffee just before his heart attack.
Just before he got shot with a heart attack gun, which was a total coincidence. The heart attack gun, it actually missed. They tried to get him with the heart attack gun, but he had a heart attack within 10 minutes afterwards anyway.
This actually seems to bolster my argument that I've been developing, is that Washington is just becoming the new version of Hollywood, since like actors, and it's like morphing into this one thing, but actors want to become politicians, and politicians want to become like famous and work in Hollywood or work on movies. And what else would make that happen other than having a whole bunch of baristas and actors kind of infiltrate Washington, right? That's like the new politics. Is not someone you want to have a beer with, it's someone you'd have a coffee with, essentially.
Right. So Bernie Sanders has now turned against Soros, and he's totally flipped the script, and they're no longer cooperating with any of those people anymore because they are completely anti-billionaire across the board, it turns out. Oh no, that's not.
No, but it's so interesting because he did bring up the oligarchy thing. So, I mean, what do you think about that? That Bernie Sanders has been talking about oligarchies and pointing out at least one side of the aisle when he's financed by.
He's the biggest disappointment of anybody in politics. And, you know, it's like, and on one level, I've traditionally wanted to have some acknowledgement of like, who the freak knows, like family being threatened, you know, him being threatened, like, did he get shot with a heart attack gun? Did it, whatever the hell. But at a certain point, you're looking at what he's doing, especially with that group that he just put together about vaccination, just loaded with the most like ridiculous disinformation, and these are supposed to be experts. Like, it's one thing if they would just want to deny the autism thing, okay, whatever, but this goes like way beyond that. Like, I don't know if you watched any of that stuff. Like, it is freaking just the most it's awful. So I'm just like, I have no respect for Bernie. Sorry, man. You know, fool me once, shame on me. In fact, George W.'s whole thing with that fool me once, that he messed, you know, shame on me, fool me twice, shame, you know.
Can't fool me again. If you fool me once, can't fool me again.
Right, but the thing is that is the three last elections that we had, for real. Like that, because in 2016, that was the fool me once, right? Which was shame on you for fooling me, to sheepdog Bernie and all of that. And then the second election, where we had in 2020, where you're like, okay, so now we have completely Bernie did the same thing again. That was fool me twice, and now it's shame on me. And then the next election, 2024, you can see the results of us having gone through that twice. They're like, we want to try and pull some angle of the same thing. It's like, dude, it's just not going to work for you this time. You've milked that as far as you could, and you better come up with something really good besides the Pied Piper candidate, because if you run with that, we're going to end up with that Pied Piper candidate, because that's how this works, you know. But I feel like there's something almost prophetic about George W. like fumbling that communication around the fool me once thing, man, because we're living it. You know what I mean?
Dude,
I think
one of my favorite comics of all time.
You could also say that his whole fool me was a reference to the 3 generations of Skull and Bones that ended up having a stranglehold on this entire country. Like, he was the third fool, like, and we fell for it all over again. So it was him actually telling us, like, you guys are idiots, to our face.
Dude, it's our comic book. It's the freaking Golden Bough in action. It's anthropology in the like modern times, where they're literally having the fool archetype going in rounds. It's the same thing. It's so weird.
Speaking of archetype too, I feel like this is where I think Bernie is smart enough to realize that he exists as this archetype of potential energy, and that when he starts transforming from this potential energy thing that he is, any other form will be a lesser version of Bernie Sanders. The best version that anyone can ever interact with Bernie Sanders is this hopeful version that's the underdog. Like he's not allowed to. Even when he originally came out and he was against the millionaires, and then it's like, wait, did you say that from your third or your fourth house? And he's like, oh, I meant with a B, the billionaires. And like, you can kind of see that progression.
The argument that people give to that is that it's his book. Oh, he made all this money off his book. He did make a lot of money off of his book. But you can look at opensecrets.com and look at where he's getting his money, and then you can see why he's taking the positions that he's taking at this moment. And so that's why he's such a big disappointment. It's like, I'm not against him making money if he made money off of his merit and whatever. But if he's just getting money,
archetype. That's all I got to say, man.
Yeah. No, it's one of the, and I think the thing is, when I say the fool me once, this is because that's a huge demographic in this country. It's the people that listened to what Bernie was saying, especially that first round, and were like resonated with it, because this is why is it that 51% of the American population is independent? And what 25 give or take is Republican, and 25 give or take is
I don't believe that, by the way.
It's true. What are you talking about? The statistics of
I
people?
do not believe the statistic. I believe that's engineered to make it always seem like we've got a season-ending cliffhanger for every single election, because that's the only thing that
happened. This is the first election in history where that's ever been the case. It's never been the case before.
Well, I feel like it's the new normal.
No, we have never been at a place where we had over half of the country being independent. And when I say independent, it means
well, you know what I mean, though? You know what I mean when you say that? That's the thing. It's like the idea that we have that many people that don't actually vote, and that most people, even originally, what made them a party ticket voter, you didn't actually, when you went to vote, they didn't supply you with a ballot. Originally, you had to bring your own ballot, which meant going to a bar where the bar had printed a ballot and basically give you a free beer if you took their party ballot. That's the original way you had your ballot in the first place. You had to bring your own paper. So they supplied it. So I feel like independent really meant anybody who wasn't getting either, really look at.
No. If we go in the scope, and you know what, you're right. I was in my phrasing of that was misleading. I'm talking about in modern politics.
True, and I hear you then agreed.
Yeah, no, that's a whole different thing. Then we're going to go back to how the Republican Party came to be in the first place as a third party, becoming the other primary party.
But I've been thinking about this a lot too, because the 80s are so weird. So you have the 60s to the 80s, and we have the 2020s now. So the 60s have this sort of rejection of 1950s and early 60s until like it was really late 60s. That they become into hippies and tune on, tune out, all this, etc. The 70s have this sort of drugged out, declassifying the CIA. Everyone's finding out things that are demoralizing truths about failures of the government. And then the 80s is a sort of rejection of that. It's like, you're wrong, mom and dad. I'm going to be cool. I'm going to be different than you. I'm going to be sober and pay my taxes and a young Republican. Like, it's a very strange patriotism with Reagan that emerges, and nationalism that emerges. And it seems inevitable that we're doing the same thing now, where people we have these children being read to by transgenders in the worst of scenarios in order to convince people that they want the Christian right to burn books and to create this state where you have to wear a tucked in shirt and a suit at all times.
Okay, right? I just want to say, when people are saying stats can be faked, with which I absolutely agree with, it happens all the time. Usually the stats that are fake, you see highlighted by the media. You don't see them trying to hide those stats. Like those are the stats that are faked are usually put at the forefront of whichever polarized thing. You didn't see that with this. And how much mention did you see of Zogby in mainstream media when that whole thing came out? Whereas who's actually, because we had so many fake polls all over the place, and I could tell you 20 ways in which they faked these polls in this election, especially. And then you had Zogby emerge, and I was like, dude, this actually made sense with what we'd expect. And they did not want to talk about that in any regular news on either side. Why not either side? Because it was signifying the same thing I'm saying about independents outnumbering Republicans and Democrats respectively. So, you know, that's just the way it is. I'm sorry. You know.
I still think that the stats could easily be faked and not be at the forefront, because there's a different type. There's the short-term lie and the long-term lie. And the long-term lie is like, no, go look at the last 10 years of reporting. It all shows that this trend was viable. And especially if you believe at all in like a Fabian society approach to things, then there clearly has to be somebody at the levels that are thinking in terms of decades and generations.
You got to fake it all the way down.
Next cycle.
Okay. So you're saying that we'll get the fake third party, like engineered. I mean, truly, that without getting a political angle on it, I feel that it's more about every single election from here forward makes more sense to the rest of the media who's struggling to like maintain relevance and be like the keepers of. If we were entertaining that, then they would have not wanted Kamala to win.
I don't know, man. I feel that again, their ultimate goal here is to keep us on the edge of our seats and to have a great cliffhanger for every single season. And sometimes, you know, like that's a great upset. It's dropping some crazy bomb at the end of season 2. Being like, what? That person's still like JFK Jr. comes back alive or something, to like those kind of levels. But that's what gets people watching and like more engaged. And if you got a fake system, then why not double down on the theatrics?
I could see that if we're going to like an Illuminati level, I could entertain that. But then
just Brave New World instead of looking at
but I can't entertain like Adam Schiff actually being like, oh yeah, well I'm really in on this and we're gonna take the fall, and I'm gonna put on a big show that I'm really protective here. You know, I don't buy it. I think he's protecting himself. You know, I think he's scared shitless, honestly. I think Adam Schiff is one of the most terrified people in politics right now. He looks like he's just literally shitting bricks like constantly. I don't feel sorry for him. He deserves it, but man.
He gets paid well enough to deal with it. I'm sure he's crying himself to sleep.
That's true. That's the thing about all of this. I mean, we'll get into that when we talk about the declassified EOs, but let's do condoms. You want to do condoms now?
Condoms for Gaza, $50 million.
Here, let's watch the video.
With so little notice, why not give organizations more time to plan for the fact that they are about to lose, in some cases, really crucial federal funding, at least for a period of time?
There was notice. It was the executive order that the president signed. There's also a freeze on hiring, as you know, a regulatory freeze, and there's also a freeze on foreign aid. And this is, again, incredibly important to ensure that this administration is taking into consideration how hard the American people are working. And their tax dollars actually matter to this administration. You know, just during this pause, Doge and OMB have actually found that there was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization, which is an organization, as you all know, that President Trump, with the swipe of his pen in that executive order, is no longer wants the United States to be a part of. So that wouldn't be in line with the president's agenda. Doge and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money. So that's what this pause is focused on, being good stewards of tax dollars.
I mean,
speaking of frozen condoms, have you ever heard of an Alaskan pipeline?
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels like that was what the subtext of that entire premise. It was all they're talking Alaskan pipeline.
Hookers, strippers like Courtney Love in Alaska and like crack pipeline. Yeah, I feel like that's true.
Yeah. Do you remember when Courtney Love found the missing flight of the Malaysian flight? And she
when she shot that guitar guy?
No, she circled it. She did a tweet many years ago when everyone was looking for the plane, and she saw these black spots on the ocean. She circled them, and she was like, "Is this the plane?" And I was like, she heard that Kurt Cobain was on a plane and he couldn't complain, and so she was like just looking for Kurt, and she found him. But anyway,
oh my god,
that was probably it. I think she nailed it, honestly. But yeah, really.
What the heck's the deal with that? Because she's obviously like, there's something to that as well. I mean, I don't know. We could segue into Courtney Love, but just the idea of Gaza condoms. What do you think the point of the? No, I mean, it's interesting to me also just the idea of a handler for Kurt Cobain that I can't even accuse her publicly, right? But what do you? Okay, just with the condom thing, what do you think is going on with Gaza and the condoms? Because this is also with Ukraine too. There are all sorts of stories where like we need to send billions of dollars to these other countries because emotionally high feeling white upper middle class liberal women are just supporting this, and now we find out what the money's actually going for.
I know people are really emphasizing that statistics can be faked, and look at the statistics of the age of people in Palestine. So like of the people in Gaza, they're like the biggest, like there's so many children. It's crazy how the children outnumber the adults in Gaza. So maybe that's what they're focused on. I don't know. Like
culturally, wouldn't all sides be somewhat opposed to condoms just by their very nature?
Well, I mean, if you're going to go into I could stir things up here, but when people talk about genocide and you want to talk about the technicalities of things, you're like, well, if the birth rate is higher than the death rate, what do we call that then? So like, that's a lot of people.
Right. Well, so making use of the condoms, could be construed as like a form of eugenics in a way, right? But at the same time, would either side, would Palestine or Israel actually be like, oh yeah, I've been looking for condoms?
Well, no, I mean they're gonna say they take out all the feeling. So what's the it's not like a burqa, they can't enforce it the same way. Like this is in people's own.
But even on like a cultural religious aspect, aren't they sort of looked down upon by both religions universally?
Right. You've seen Every Sperm is Sacred from Monty Python. That's that's the Protestants, right? No, the Catholics versus the Protestants. I can go down to that store anytime I want, and I can get a French tickler. I can get whatever, and then the wife is just, why don't you dare? He's like, I'm just saying I could. You guys,
this is just a move from Big Condom, I think.
I think you're muted.
I mean, I was gonna say we can also do the Bush story, but I was gonna really quickly let me look also at the Doge Grok conversation I just started here. Doge just stopped $50 million worth of wasting of condom money, but why were $50 million worth of condoms going to Gaza? Health and population control. One primary reason for sending such quantities to a region like Gaza is framed around public health and population control. The goal is to provide access to contraception, misuse of aid. These were reports that condoms were being repurposed for non-intended uses, notably
balloon animals.
Regression. Well, what can you put? What kind of flammable? What kind of retardants can you put? You know what I mean? There's probably something like a bomb. Napalm in a condom sounds like a pretty serious weapon. I don't know if
that's why we're sending condoms with the repurposed.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So that Gaza can make weapons. You got to give weapons to Palestinians, and you're not allowed to send them certain kinds of weapons. So you send them the parts that they can use to make weapons themselves, right? That way, there's a reason for Israelis to continue fighting them. Was that too deep?
I keep hearing like flowers for. I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I'm going to go Star Wars reference, but flowers for Algernon. What is Algernon? And what is the story where the kid, it's like awakenings, where the kid is cured of his mental disability, then he goes back or whatever.
Flowers for
condoms for Gaza should be like the name of some play or something. Like that just feels like like, oh, did you go see Flowers for or Condoms for Gaza? Oh yeah, no, it was incredible. You got to go see it. I'm sorry.
This is how every one of my books starts, David. I mean, it usually starts on this premise, and you're like, how come no one's picking up this torch?
But no, there actually is some pretty cool evidence about, like, I mean, what kind of cool things that you could watch on a TikTok video about what you can make with condoms. I'm impressed every day with what I see on TikTok, people making with condoms. But from explosives to kites, flaming kites. What did I just see? There was Look at these crazy condom bombs.
That guy's a lunatic.
What is that, hydrogen?
A lunatic. I don't know, but it seems crazy. I mean, look at it's got God's name written on it, probably. Like, that seems kind of interesting to me that they're making weapons out of condoms. I mean, pretty exciting.
This still could just be part of it because you throw a bunch of like naughty condoms in a room full of children that first they start playing around with it, but really they're interested in what they're really for, right? That's the underlying. So in this case, it's like, of course they're going to make bombs with it. They make bombs out of everything that you give them. So this is just a natural like progression of that. But the importance is that they're getting used to it, the shape, the feel, the smell. Like they're becoming acclimated to it. So the next time that it comes up in a normal conversation, or when they actually are trying to prevent them from having more offspring, it's no, like they've gotten over the novelty aspect of like, haha, I made balloon animals, I made bombs. Now it's like, maybe I really should use one of those. Like this is all just the steps towards that.
The comments right now are off the charts, man. Scott de Blois says Trojan horse. Okay, they're for, and also the people saying drug smuggling, which is interesting. Yeah.
Oh, great point.
Yeah.
Do we do George Bush crying or Selena Gomez crying?
So
first?
I'm not a fan of Candace Owens for a variety of reasons, but she was cracking me up looking at her imitation of Selena Gomez, where she's emphasizing like when you're crying, when you're having a whole like, you know, episode, like to what it takes for you to like reach over for your phone and to even consider, I'm going to share this on social media, to be looking at your phone while you're like, oh, I'm crying. You're going to go look, well, where's my phone? And you just keep going. Like it just does. It feels very put on.
Dude, Selena Gomez disgusts me, and I hope that like I'm wrong and she's just a brave trans like Disney kid. But I mean, everything about her, dude, it's just like kind of a bummer that she exists at all. You know, that's kind of the thing for me.
David, you actually
I mean, all my people are getting attacked.
You're making such a great point, because that represents a gap in the market. Right now, we don't have any convenient technology that it specifically caters to people that want to film themselves crying without looking like narcissistic assholes, right? But if you had like some kind of cry meter, cry detector, that like a little drone, I mean, this is the silly version, right? But like the real version of this will exist, like a little drone undocks and it like come in zooms and it like films you as you're crying. You can be like, no, get that camera out of here. Like you can do all of the motions that would be more natural than, you know, whatever aspect of this, because it had almost like an uncanny valley quality that made it so, I guess, reprehensive to people that she was like, oh yeah, maybe I should take that down. But there's a right way to do this, right? We just don't have the solution yet.
Right. It was like, well, I mean, you can do it really quickly. You can grab your phone and do it quickly. So there's that argument. It's just reminding me of like that Tom Green bit where he's talking about like how easy it is to make mistakes in life now because of your phone. Like the teacher that sent the nude to like their student and just like, well, it took 2 seconds to do. So they just went, oh, what did I just do? Like Selena took down the video, right? So she's like, maybe I shouldn't, now people are going to whatever, but he was saying that in the past you would have had to have gotten an envelope, got a stamp, lick the stamp. Like you're obviously drunk while you're doing this. Like you go to the, to the post office, you mail a thing, you put, you're like all the steps involved that you would have had to have done to make such a horrible mistake can now be made so quickly. So there is the argument that you're crying and you're just like, maybe I just want people to see how I feel about it. It's just, but it feels so contrived, and that's what people are laughing at. That's why that meme is funny. Just looking at, Christian Bale with the MAGA hat is because just the ridiculousness of trying to show everybody the display. Like there's nothing like more like irritating than somebody using emotion in a manipulative way, and so like, and it's I think it's good to like laugh at that when you see it, because what is the difference between laughter and crying? Laughter is like just full release, right? Like whereas crying is like you're having a release but you're also resisting it. You know what I mean? Like they're part of a continuum, like laughing and crying, but like one is like a release with resistance, the other one's just total release. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also you don't want to look like an absolute psycho to everybody all the time. So there are certain times when socially you're expected to cry, and I think that also plays into it. Like if you show
yeah.
up to your your
Yeah.
family's funeral and you're just laughing hysterically, you're like, "Don't worry, I'm actually crying, but I'm just not doing the withholding part."
Right. That was the basis for Camus' The Stranger, how it starts out where he goes to his mother's funeral and he doesn't cry. And then he's like tripping out on the fact, he's like, why didn't I cry? And it's an existential book. So it's speaking that there's, there's more to it. But it starts off on that note because like you say, like you're supposed to cry at the funeral. If you don't cry at the funeral, what the fuck is wrong with you? So interesting.
You become a well-respected author, apparently.
Well, it wasn't autobiographical. Yeah.
How about them JFK files? So, they said, and I love our new White House website. I feel like if you guys haven't spent the time checking out the White House website, it is glossy. There's something kind of like, I would watch this movie, like I just feel like America is back, starring Donald J. Trump, J.D. Vance, featuring Melania Trump and the cabinet, right? The way this website looks, it just feels like a movie, like for real. I love what they're doing here. But they're going to release the Trump files. And we kind of talked about this last week, the idea that all this information was already out, except for a few little things here and there. Here's George Bush after Trump said he's going to declassify the JFK, UFO, and Epstein Island files, but didn't mention 9/11. Ooh, it's like, come on.
That's
Bush.
not
Like,
really
it's
that
so
moment,
adorable.
though, right? That's not really
Isn't
that
it?
moment.
Yeah, I think it is. I think
Is that
yeah.
what was being said while this happened? Can you turn up the
Yeah.
volume? Is there volume? Is that what's
No,
happening?
I don't. I can't confirm or deny. I don't have audio.
I mean,
for
is this
this
when
stuff.
he said he's going to declassify the JFK files? Like, what was that moment? Because that's glorious. But whatever the case, that's how George Bush feels about it. So for all intents and purposes, I'll take it.
I think it's true. Yeah, like to an extent, like his dad's dead. All of the, he had to make sure that his dad had an honorable, my dad is safe, and now he can move on.
What Bush doesn't know is that when the UFO files are released, it's going to be directly related to 9/11, and he's not going to know what to do about that because aliens were definitely involved. No, I'm sorry. It's bullshit.
Undocumented workers. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know,
they were unidentified flying objects, were they not?
We've had some good combos.
There was no windows. Black planes, no windows. They look like military. How many people said that? A lot. Did they really
and jets, targeted missiles, interballistic missiles, where we thought there were and planned demolitions already in the construction of the building and the Torah and the it just goes on. But with the JFK files declassifying, it seems like more and more of this is the entire last 60 years is being released. We had alien scientist Jeremy Reese on the show at some point talking about his theory on why some of the JFK documents weren't released. I'm trying to remember the name. Who is
connect to Roswell?
There's a lady who's the Babushka lady or something like that. Who is the Babushka lady?
Joe Alexander made a connection between Roswell and JFK assassination. I forget.
There's a woman who's still alive involved with the JFK assassination who is an agent and was in charge of maybe a handler for the landlord. I think it's the landlord for Oswald, and they're still alive. And that was his hypothesis, was the reason why not all the data is out yet is literally just because they're waiting until everyone's dead who's involved with it completely. Right.
But that's the thing, though, is when you're looking at the agencies and what is still in effect, So I don't know if it's as simple as that, like, because everyone could be dead and they still don't want it shown. For one thing, it'll just make people not trust the government into the future, where it's like these agencies were able to do this, so why should we?
But also, we're talking about
correct. Ruth Payne. That's right.
When the rubber hits the road on this, we're literally talking about I think 3,000 documents that just had not been released or fully unredacted, right, before coming out. It's not as if the government is now going to open up a new investigation and release more and new information that wasn't already on paper. Anything about the culture of the 1960s CIA, it was very much reading between the lines, and the things that were being sort of dispelled in like small meeting rooms and verbally, like they really did take their secret society stuff pretty seriously. In fact, like all the MK Ultra papers, for example, they get cited. Largely, these are just like financial receipts and documents about this money was sent to this person on this date, regarding this project, and most of the actual project notes are kind of lost to time, maybe because they got burnt before the church committee got their hands on them, or maybe because a lot of it just was never committed to text to begin with. And I feel that that's going to be the biggest portion of the JFK papers, that so much of it was never committed in black and white, just spelling it out in like the legal clarifications on what would constitute an actual confession and all these things. Like, I believe that the CIA maybe, at least if the agent wasn't completely whacked out on all the different MK Ultra drugs that they were testing.
Right, but we're at an impasse in a way with all of this, because even with everything that we've already had, because there is that huge investigation that followed later that we see represented with Kevin Costner in the Oliver Stone film, right? But like, when you're watching that movie, that is so loaded with like just straight up, like, it's not just about the disinformation. It's also the major things that they leave out of what was actually discussed in those court proceedings. So like, he irks me so bad, because people will watch something like that, or Hoffa, or any of these things, and they'll walk away feeling like they got some like educational, like, now I haven't, so far removed from what those proceedings actually involved. And so really, it's not just like the information isn't out there, it's just that people haven't been exposed to it still. We deal with that all the time, constantly. Like, that's the problem with the media, right? It's like, they'll tell you something that's happening right now where the information's right in front of you, but most people don't have access to it. So it's like, we're basically, what we're asking for is, can you just take the meat that's already there, that people would normally have to like dig to find, and just like shove it in the public's face, and to be like, look at what we now know, he was shot from a sewer drain 15 feet away. You know what I mean? The guy was arrested and released the same day, that kind of stuff. There was 8 shooters. They were all synchronized to shoot at the same time. They missed the first 2 times. They shot the driver in the shoulder, and then that third actually just came from one guy from after the fact. Like, we have bullets for all of those shooters. We know where each one of them were situated. The data is.
Well, let me just really quickly reiterate, because whoever said it, let's go to what's it called? It's JFKPayne.com for the movie. There's a documentary on the assassination, and Mrs. Payne, the last living person, the landlord. I tried finding out where you can buy it from them, and it looks like See the Film. You can buy the film from Google Play. Although when I tried going to YouTube, it was not available. So when I looked on Odyssey, I found it. The Assassination of Miss Payne, fully available on Odyssey. So definitely check out this documentary that's talking about the last survivor of the case, and why perhaps it took so long for them to be willing to release it, because there's always this effort to protect their own in the agency, right? This is a major reason.
Trump released a bunch of the documents, but they were like 80% redacted. You literally go through them, and it's just like, there's.
Let's do what was Melania wearing inauguration ball?
Right, I know, right? I totally had that thought immediately. Did you? Is that why you're?
Yeah, probably. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I was like, she's wearing a redacted outfit. What's happening here?
Thank you, for the love of God. I was like, the first thing I see is this. It's like, wow, lady, how can you be more clear about being a CIA document?
Well, what it looks like too is that the way it goes down at the bottom, like the artistry of that, just looks like it's out, it's done. Like, it's just like the end. It's like, we've been redacting, and now it's just dropping off. That's what I saw when I first saw it.
I liked it. I thought that was a nice outfit. Okay. Vatican issues warning against demonic AI. The Vatican's worried that AI might be channeling solid state demons into reality, just like our friend Knowles, Christopher Knowles, we had on the show recently talking about this as well. What do you think? We've talked about this idea that there's maybe the good guy spirit and the bad guy spirit. There's the organic, intelligent echo, and this sort of AI might be like a death cult. I like it.
John C. Lilly did it first. Sorry, Vatican. You're kind of behind the ball on this one.
Well, but you know what? They probably said this at some point. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying it's continuation of what was started with Lilly continues with the Vatican.
Yeah, it's the mechanical Turk all over again.
I don't know the actual answer to this question. Has the Vatican ever officially come out against Solomon for raising the daemons and helping him build the temple? Like, they were literally pulling these pillars out of the sea, right? Out of the Red Sea.
I think they make the point that Solomon's made some mistakes, but
They kept the book. They threw the book in there.
Well, Solomon was warned, and he did what he did anyway. And why? Because of loopholes. And you'll see that all throughout the Bible is that something gets presented. Even the New Testament is large. The gospel sets up the communication. The gospel is just like, this is what it is. And like most of the rest of the New Testament is just a search for loopholes. It's like, well, yeah, he said that, but how do we apply this? And it's like, whoa. Well, maybe. It's like I see that all throughout the entire, not just the Tanakh, but the New Testament as well. Loopholes, man.
I'm excited that we have about the same amount of people watching on X as we do on YouTube right now. Good job, everybody, in your own personal pools of wisdom. I'm glad for you. Let me just look at this article for a second. It says that January 28th, without press conference or any formal notice, this text was delivered to the Vatican press corps 12 hours prior. The document's latest in increasing efforts from the Vatican to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. Why is it that AI, the Vatican's constantly trying to regulate government, weaponry, medicine, nuclear technology, and now AI? They just really want to be involved in the way the world works, and they think that they have some precedent for it. Maybe they do. The text is designed to address the anthropological and ethical challenges raised by AI, as stated in the opening paragraphs with 117 sections and over 200 footnotes. The document is indeed a hefty and is replete with praise for the ways in which AI can assist aspects of life, while also warning about the grave dangers it poses, right? So they're not saying you can't use it. They want you to be able to use demons for benefiting mankind. An expert in using demons to benefit mankind. Will, why don't you tell us what you think about this?
You've muted.
Oh, come on, you're muted. All right, well, you can figure out your microphone for a second. Anyone else want to talk about Koresh first?
Well, first they take away masonry, and now they're taking away AI. I believe that if they hadn't done the first, they wouldn't have to worry about the second.
Well, isn't what they're articulating or what you're saying, isn't that just exactly what Elon Musk has to say about it as well?
There's something I just want to say, Thomas, when you have like a little quip like that and you pull out your Sherlock, something very sassy about it, I really respect it.
I am writing a book.
Okay, I have a question. It's kind of silly, but you remember that thing they have a lot of like art installations at the Vatican, and there's the one that's always like really tripped me out is that sphere with the cracks in it and like the clockwork elf infrastructure inside. You know what I'm talking about? Like
totally.
And it like the way that like if I look at that and then I look at the cube that was between the two towers, that was designed by the same guy who designed the two towers, that they would rotate once every 24 hours in his own explanation to be representative of the Kaaba and Mecca, yet it's a sphere. Like, the people who do the pilgrimage and how they rotate around the Kaaba, and he was like, we rotate this between the two towers to represent. And also, if you watch The Wiz, it's what they're all encircling, like in the middle of the movie, like whereas Emerald City is the two towers. What is that? Is there an official explanation of that art, or are we just supposed to look at it and I don't know, feel like it's
I'm sure if you want to look at Vatican Luciferian art, let's look it up. What's it? It's called Legini di Mal? No, that's not it.
No, that's a different one. No, if you put sphere, maybe mechanical sphere or something, you put Luciferian, like it's
well, we all want
maybe
sphere within a sphere, isn't it? Isn't the sphere within a sphere?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Sphere within a sphere. Yeah, that thing. Yeah, what is their official explanation of this thing? Is it just like because I mean the destruction of the sphere between the two towers, like, and this was put there long time ago, 1966.
And his commissions were for the headquarters of the United Nations and Vatican museums. Okay, right. So versions of the world sphere can be found all over the world. Berkeley, San Francisco, San Diego. He's got them in a bunch of places. The world.
Does it say represent up there? I'm looking at what does it represent? What are they saying that it represents?
You said all over the world, and they just listed 3 cities in California.
I mean, those are the only ones that matter, Thomas. San Francisco, and then maybe Miami. But I'm only saying that for Longo, not for you. They are meant to represent the ideal city with contrasting imagery of organic and human shapes combined with technological and gear-like components.
Like, doesn't this feel
Okay.
relatable to what we were just looking at in terms of what they were
100%.
arguing
This
about AI?
is Echo and SSI. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
it's Orga
exactly-
and Mecha like as one thing, but like, yeah, it's just and you look at it and you see yourself in it, right? That's like the idea.
Oh, because of the reflection. Your world's
Yeah,
the
yeah, like the reflection is
so
part of the
shiny.
piece itself. Yeah.
There's also an
That's
H.R. Geiger sort of quality
Right.
to this. It reminds me of the movie, and what were they, the Archetypes, where they had like the black goo that was the actual origin of all life on the planet, and the Death Star.
Right.
Yeah, it's clearly the Death Star. I mean,
biomechanics. Yeah.
in the mid-construction Death Star feeling is very. You can't help but vibe that a little bit. Oh, there's Will. Will, come on, Koresh T. Keep going. That's more
Can you
like
hear me?
it.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
You sound
Can
great.
you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes or no? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
we can hear you.
Oh,
We can hear
good
you.
God.
You hear us.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay, back to AI. The only thing I could talk about Koresh if you want me to, but I was going to say that
It's
like
all the same.
most scientists automatically started talking about AI as if there was a advanced civilization, it would already have AI. Like as soon as it happened, because there's that Ludwig Boltzman guy who basically says that any technology was already made before it was possible. Does that make sense?
You kind of
Like,
remind me of Ludwig, by the way. I never thought
he's the
about
guy
it.
who did the Boltzmann brain because he
totally.
figured that if the brain is possible, then according to probabilities, a brain would just snap into existence with no previous evolution tied to it. But what that also means is like anytime an event happens, it's 100% chance that it would happen. He's also one of the guys who is behind the whole idea that if you put like 1,000 monkeys with a typewriter on an island and left them there for like 1,000 years, there's a possibility that they would write like Finnegan's Wake or a phone book. Or,
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? That all came from Ludwig, based upon the fact of probabilities is that in any system, some systems will already like snap into order. And this has he was one of the main proponents of entropy. See, there's a bunch of problems that have to do around entropy. Like the second rule of thermodynamics is that everything will slowly go from order into chaos. But then we have theories like evolution, which go against the second rule of thermodynamics. And Boltzmann was kind of obsessed with these ideas and concepts and trying to work them out in mathematics. And he came up with like the Boltzmann equation or equilibrium or something. It's called something like that. I mean, all of this stuff kind of leads to Nash and John Nash and game theory and ideas of that. And there's also quite a few like Christian evolutionists who kind of use Boltzmann's theories also. Like there's evidence that certain species that drop out of the fossil record will suddenly reappear in the fossil record. And Boltzmann would use probability to state that, but some people think that it's like almost like spawn points or something. It all leads kind of to, or all akin to simulation theory. But
Right, but doesn't it kind of remind you of Sync in the way that it's an acknowledgement of there being a higher order, and that we approach it, but then really like no matter what the appearance, we're still governed by those higher principles, right? So
I mean that's the only reason like I really like hung on to Boltzmann is because there's sync ideas there, you know.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I will center in on these different scientists and really like just dig into everything they got. And then of course I did the same thing to like Philip K. Dick and David Koresh, but it's almost like useless information. What I was really, really wanting to come on and say, because you guys are batting around that, is not everybody knows everything now. Like the whole thing with like JFK, that shit's been out there. And then
Right.
I found shit in there. And I was like, well, fuck, nobody knows this. Like,
Yeah.
there's certain things about David Koresh that are not on the internet. And
Word.
I even was talking to this professor of the history of religion about Koresh, because she studied him since 1993. And I'm like, how do people not know this? And
Right.
there's secrecy works better than people think. I mean, there's secrets
Dude.
it works way better than you think it does.
Yeah, I've been coming across this issue so much, like especially lately, it seems, where there's this assumption that people have that everything exists on the internet, like information-wise, like that. Like, and you've like, will come across something, you're like, dude, I can't access this through Google. I'm sorry. Like, it's like even like scholarly interpretations of different works and different things that you would think would just be like, oh, you just type that into a search and it'll pop right up,
this
right?
used to be the most abstract concept of like if a tree falls in the woods, does it? But now we can see the actual version of that, and it's what you're talking about. If we're in a coffee shop and you make a claim and I can't, or none of us can look that up and find it on Wikipedia or Snopes or Google. Is it really true, David? And I feel like that it's like a tree fell in the forest and no one was there to hear it.
Right.
Well, there's a certain amount of responsibility as researchers. We have to make up our mind on what's true or not. But there's like a weird thing. This was taught to me by Sync, because there was everybody who just assumed what the reasons were. Like there's kind of like two different camps, right? There's the idea that Sync is intentional and done as some sort of like predictive programming or whatever, which probably could be true, but a lot of people are very convinced of that,
right?
camp.
Is that not the role of Echo, is to provide that sync like intentionally?
Right. I mean, well, we don't know. It's very possible that this is a natural occurring thing that other people figured out before us and used intentionally. And the same way that, like, you know, their public relations was probably called something else back in the olden times.
Propaganda.
But, exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like, we know certain things are not. Consensus is confused on at least UAPs. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you don't think secrecy works, secrecy worked for 70 fucking years. Like, it worked. The common consensus was that you were crazy if you talked about UFOs. Now, that's all. It was like Obama came out and said it, and it's all of a sudden everybody's like, oh yeah, well of course. Well, of course.
Dude, isn't it freaking weird that like leading up to the election, people were tripping out over like UFOs, and then we just get to find out like what today, that it was just like, it's now completely acknowledged that those were all got permission. They all supposedly came from us, and this was like, so basically they admitted it was a psyop on some level, like without, you know, like that's. There was,
we know that they're admitting to fucking with us to a certain degree.
Yeah, and even they're like, oh, we gave people permission to just participate in this thing or whatever, like private and like public. Like, that's weird, man. Yeah. So what the hell? Like,
that's the problem, though. It's almost like we have that things are happening so quick that we are adapting to this shit and not going like, oh wait, that this was considered out there 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
New Jersey, so New Jersey flying UAP phenomena were given green light by the FAA for what they call research purposes. Why couldn't Biden just inform the public? Right, crazy.
Right. And what was that? What were the specifics of that research? Can we look at that? I'd be interested to know. I'd like to see. Those are some documents I'd like to look at, if that was actually something that went across somebody's desk and they're like, oh yeah.
It feels like War of the Worlds, like Orson Welles.
Yeah, totally.
Podcast. It feels like that's what they were doing. You know how that's considered to be a psyop in and of itself. Like,
I feel like that would have been like a side aspect of it, though. It's like, oh, you're doing this. Well, that would be great if we just don't tell anyone, because now as you're doing your practical research, we can piggyback on that and do a War of the Worlds sort of part 2 for no extra cost.
Right. This is like a poor man's Project Bluebeam.
Who's more likely to vote for who based on the UAPs? You know, like wouldn't this make you vote for Trump more if you were an American, or for Biden more? What do you think?
Again, this could be a hostage crisis situation where it's like, vote for me. I'm the guy that'll look into this.
Well, I think that was
Well,
what the JFK papers were. The reason that Trump never gave them in the first term is because I think that he was using them politically for the second term. And
I don't think they allowed him to do what he wanted. He was not he didn't have that authority like he wanted to, but I don't think he could.
Here's the thing:
he caved to the Democrats over and over again.
To prove that there are things about JFK that nobody talks about and that is not like there's no books written about it, it's not on the internet, is like just take the JFK film, right? With Kevin Costner, and there's certain characters you don't know who those characters are, but you recognize the actor. So we talk about like Joe Pesci, we talk about like Tommy Lee Jones, we talk about Kevin Bacon, we talk about Jack Lemmon, right? Yeah. All of those guys, if you go into researching, are ordained ministers. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, their own private. They're all bishops in their own private church that has no congregation,
including the guy who started Discordia, Kerry Wendell Thornley, or whatever his name.
I was thinking about him earlier in the
fucking batch of them.
Right.
He's like one of our heroes, and he's one of them.
Right. This is not debatable if you get into like this is all like
No, because in 1976 the American government said there was very well possible a conspiracy, but their conclusion was that the United States government wasn't responsible for covering it up.
Right.
But
so
nobody realizes that they admitted that there was a conspiracy. You're like, bro, they're saying it's not their fault, but they're saying something happened. Like,
So why, when we're watching freaking Oliver Stone's film, are they not showing us that these people were bishops in their own church so that they can have their private meetings?
Already 4 freaking hours long.
In fact, the fact that they were all ordained ministers was the reason he did it. Was the reason he got interested is because he was like, wait, something's going on here.
Right. So
and he had a whole folder called Odd Sects or Odd Churches, but that folder's missing. So it's very well possible that Oliver Stone just didn't have the information on that. However,
they wouldn't let him do it. Or who, like, it was like Heaven's Gate. The movie was 5.5 hours long, but they were just like, sorry, man, you can't
expose military industrial complex. It was kind of a sacred cow that we never really. I've always wanted to expose the military industrial complex. It was kind of a sacred cow that we never really successfully infiltrated.
So I went into the interaction thinking that I was dealing with a defense contractor. Little did I know I was actually talking to a pretty senior person within the CIA. 10 minutes into our sit down, he said, "This is what I do for a living. I work in the intelligence community." Wait, what do you? I work for the CIA. I imagine it must have been really tough for you to work in the intel community under a Trump administration. And that's when the floodgate opened. Information from him. From Trump?
When an executive branch agency is actively withholding information from the commander-in-chief and bragging about doing it, I mean, it's very rare that you actually get something like this with incontrovertible proof. You hear conspiracy theories, you hear allegations, but this guy was actually talking about how they withheld important intelligence from the president.
His sort of unfounded arrogance and confidence were really shocking to me. And I think that also explains why he was so open and vocal about his perspectives, his viewpoint, and his support, and literally bragging to a complete stranger at a public restaurant about these evil things that they were doing.
I'm shocked that she's shocked. That's the most shocking part of the whole thing. I can't believe that the CIA wouldn't do what the president says and is bragging.
No, that's bragging. Bragging is the part that she's confused about. She's like, wow, I didn't know that if I went to Washington, D.C., that these guys would be...
how disconnected from reality do you have to be?
I mean, my God, right? Yeah.
Word.
All right. But, okay, so the point being that withholding information, that was, I think you were talking about, Will, and then, to corroborate this idea. And then also, David, you had said he couldn't, Trump couldn't release some of this stuff to the public because he would be demanding that these people do their job. And last time that may or may not have happened during the FOIA in 1994. That didn't go. I mean, who knows exactly what's true about Bill Clinton and the Freedom of Information Act on MK Ultra.
Right.
But there's a lot of destroyed papers. There's a paper trail of just destroyed papers at that point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So the thing with we've discussed this, but when you're looking at MK Ultra documentation and the stuff, and you're just looking at it, you'll be looking at a piece of paper, and you'll see, okay, they drilled a hole in this guy's head. Okay, they left this guy strapped down on acid for all these days, playing a recording on repeat, all this stuff, and then you'll see the shit that's it's blocked out. Like you're like, okay, now I'm looking at something that's been redacted. I'm like, if I'm allowed to see the hole drilling and all this other crazy stuff, what is it that I'm not allowed to see? Like that's what gets me, man. And
a lot of the times it's the actual name. I mean, among a lot of things, but it's the names themselves. But the names themselves is where this gets crazy. And I think the JFK, going back to that, is where this becomes the most prevalent. Like, for example, the crazy eyebrows guy that Joe Pesci plays, right? David Ferry. David Ferry was also instrumental in the beginnings of the Civil Air Patrol, nationwide Civil Air Patrol, which was something that Lee Harvey Oswald joined as a kid before he even joined the military. And the fact that, like, George the Morin Show, who's one of the linchpins of this entire thing, that he is connected in so many different angles. He knew the Jackie's family. He used to brag about, again, bragging, intelligence agent. He used to brag about having Jackie sit on his knee before she even knew JFK. He was also an intelligence guy that was kind of boots on the ground for Bush, for Zapata Oil. They would send him to like Haiti to like do oil excavation types of routines. He also ends up being the liaison between Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina Oswald when they come back to the United States, and he helps like repatriate them into the country, specializing in like Soviets that have now come over here. How many times does like this one name, Robert Gordon Wasson, freaking pops up in the JFK files? Dr. Putriar comes up in the JFK files, who's a direct relation to like the Aldous Huxley family. Like once Aldous Huxley's name starts popping up in places, you're like, now all of a sudden maybe they killed JFK because of something that had to do with like evolution research. Who the hell knows?
Okay, going back to Mohrenschildt, right? You mentioned
George the Mohrenschildt, yes.
Yeah, he's admitted, right? Because it's really cool in between I always like to say this. I've probably said this on this podcast before, but in between the book and the series for 11/22/63 by Stephen King, the Mohrenschildt character had to change. Because when the book was written, it wasn't confirmed that he was CIA. And when the series came out, it was admitted.
right. Word. Hey, do you guys have
the whole character had to change? Where like in the series, he's sitting there with a belt around his neck and he's like, yeah, I'm CIA. It's like, wait a minute.
So it turns out that one of the best values of Oliver Stone's film is just so when you're reading Peter Lavinda, you have somebody, you can have people to visualize, because you know what.
100%. I agree with that.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Fletcher Prouty is.
Who's that?
Fletcher Prouty. Do you guys know who that is?
No.
Okay, so the Donald Sutherland character in JFK,
Mr. X.
Mr. X, exactly. Mr. X is based off of a few different people. Like everybody in that movie is kind of like a composite in the same way that the Doors kind of blend some characters together. Oliver Stone does that all the time. But anyway,
he wants to mythologize. Yeah, whatever.
Fletcher Prouty is basically the one that went to Garrison and told him about the industrial complex. And he's the one who was in like Antarctica or had been sent to Antarctica because he was like the intelligence liaison to the Navy or something. Anyways, he has a whole bunch of stuff that you can find voice recordings online, but specifically about Bush and Zapata and how that oil rig was basically being used during the Bay of Pigs, because up until after JFK, Bush was basically nothing more than a Texas oil man. And it wasn't until afterwards that Nixon started putting him into politics. And then when Bush became the director of the CIA, he had no previous intelligence.
Maybe I do feel like it's important to point out here that yes,
Mr. X is the connection point on that, though. Mr. X had all of the goods on Bush.
But that Richard Nixon gave George Herbert Walker Bush some of his political capital, but Prescott Bush gave Nixon his political capital. So really it was Prescott giving the ball to Nixon, and then it was kind of like, and you better freaking hire my son for like a really good role down the line, because that's the reason that Prescott even put Nixon in the power, was to set him up for his son to have this organic trajectory of, oh, he was just this oil guy. He didn't come from the intelligence agencies like I did, even though we share lineage and Skull and Bones and CIA and everything else that would go with that.
Yeah, I like it when I'm antsy to respond, and then Thomas, you just say the thing that I'm waiting to say. Thank you.
I want to switch gears now because most people don't talk about it, but David Koresh had an opinion on JFK. And his opinion on JFK is that's why God was mad at America. It's because JFK was the first Catholic to ever be acknowledged. So the whole in God we trust, and the whole idea of he oversees our prosperity, that's on the back of the dollar bill and everything, talking about
our enterprise.
Right. Was trumped when they elected a Catholic, because supposedly, in accordance with Koresh, God is completely and utterly anti-Roman Catholic. Now, that's the weird thing, because in all honesty, like what happens in the Dark Ages, what's in the Bible is totally reversed during the Catholic rule. Like they changed a whole bunch of things. And so David Koresh, is being a Seventh-day Adventist, which is basically the Protestant version of taking the Bible literally, was pointing out all of the things that the Roman Catholics had done. And then the day that, or the year that JFK brought into the Sunday laws, which would go in contempt of God's. So God says that the Sabbath is on Saturday, and now you're making it a rule according to the law of the United States that you can't even celebrate the Sabbath on the day that it's supposed to be celebrated on.
It's pretty weird. Yeah.
Because of that's why. So I've thought a lot about this, because all of the we're talking about ordained ministers, right? That killed JFK. And what if there's some truth to that? What if God killed JFK? I mean, everybody who, like all of them involved, like I said, ordained ministers.
Why did their church have no congregation and they had regular meetings where only they attended? And they're not just ministers, they're all bishops. Let's be clear. Every one of them is a bishop, and there's no one else involved other than them. Like, that's what's crazy. Like, I'm sorry.
They were all taught to do that by Fred Chrisman, one of the very first guys who ever published anything on flying saucers, and Dr. Frank Stranges, the guy who was.
That's true. That's one of the many connections between UFO shit and JFK and Roswell. It's so weird.
But they're the ones who taught them to become. They all had degrees. Also, they were all like PhDs in criminology, which they were taught to be by fucking Stranges. And all of them were ordained out of the same thing. Fred Chrisman was ordained also. Fred Chrisman was the bishop of Oregon. The whole Oregon chapter of the Universal Church was run by fucking Chrisman. And then Frank Stranges was one. And then a whole bunch of the individuals with JFK. And they were all using like the radio stations in those cities to basically propagandize Christian messages. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at Thomas E. Beckham's Condoms.
Oh, no, he's getting too close to the truth of the capital T.
That's what happened.
You're cutting me off, man.
Well, you finish your sentence. What were you saying?
Well, it's all Christian music, like all of the music that they were doing too, because they're all very similar to Charles Manson, and they all got connections to Charles Manson. In fact, they all look the same, and Manson fits the profile. Like there's a lot of people who say Manson and Oswald look alike. and that Carrie Wendell Thornley and Manson look alike. And in
Is there
fact,
like
there's a lot of people who say Carrie Wendell Thornley is just a double for Oswald.
Is there a David Koresh album that we can find? Is this like
if you go on to wacosurvivors.com, that's owned by David Thibodeau, who is one of the survivors. He's put up a whole bunch of selections on their audio for the music of Koresh. But I've also found it, like, I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube Music if you just type in Koresh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
He has
actually,
a posthumous album, right? It's more of like an EP.
He was trying to make a movie and do the score of the movie also. But
he did actually. That ended up happening kind of.
No, they didn't. Well, I mean the
event itself did the movie. It's like when Walt Disney promised those kids on the Mickey Mouse Club that he would film 9/11. I mean that he would do the Wizard of Oz, the Disney Wizard of Oz, and then they go up the cake with the 3 pillars. I mean candles, and there's all the smoke and the kids sing Heil or whatever, and then they go, he promised them that he would do it in full color. That while he's in black and white, holding a book with like the checkered board, it's just super Masonic over the top. But he promised those kids that he would make that, and so in a way it happened. So maybe it's similar, He's like, I'm going to make a movie, and then it's like, wow.
Well, he talked about movies a lot. Like, and if you watch the series, there's a whole thing where they're talking about Lawnmower Man.
A lot about Lawnmower Man.
And a lot of the kids would get through the Bible studies just to get to the movie at the end. But what he was doing was he's using the movies in a very sync way to explain what his experience was.
Right.
And if you and there's a thing that you guys were talking about earlier, not in this video, but you did a video about the scripture of the Quran earlier today. And it was very interesting to me because it has a lot of correlations to what they were talking about. Anyways, he was using the movies and the films as sort of like a way to get the points across of the scripture and stuff. So he was showing them like Von Doniget's like Chariots of the Gods and stuff like that. But this is very interesting. He talked about if there was a movie to be made, he would want it to be Mel Gibson, right?
Of course.
Which is so fucking hilarious that Mel Gibson not only had the #1 top rated movie, Passion of the Christ,
which is having a sequel coming up.
He's making the sequel, which is basically
he's currently the liaison. He's the liaison between Trump and Hollywood, right? Officially.
It's true. Yeah, weird big things go on. I'm trying to so this is the thing, Will. I want to find if there's some relatively official album of like a compilation of Koresh's music, because I've been wanting to play it with Lawnmower Man ever since I watched that series.
So in the Psalm, they're not really gospel. In the Psalms, they have a name for music, like David, the master musician, and it starts with an S. I can't remember it. But that's what he called his music. And there's one, it's within the last couple of weeks, because I pay attention to what's happening. That community really doesn't like me, but I pay attention to what's going on there. And
the Koresh community?
It's more important if you like them.
Yeah.
Because you got to understand, like, the ones who believed in him are very secretive. And so
being the bad boy for the Koresh community is not the accolade I think you think it is, but I like it anyway.
And then there's a whole group of motherfuckers, because what I'm saying is like the SEALs are real, bro. The SEALs are a thing. So it doesn't really matter what you think of Koresh. Do you get what I'm saying? The people who know the SEALs don't want me to talk about the SEALs. Or the truth about what Koresh is. Now, the people who are level-minded but may, they have an anger towards Koresh. So they don't, those people lost their family based off the decisions of this man, and they don't believe the SEALs. They think.
Do you think Janet Reno believed the SEALs? I always imagine, what if she gets the call and she's like, good God, he's releasing the real SEALs? And that's
Bro,
when
listen.
Do you think Janet Reno was like the only actual woman in politics at that time? Like,
You have to understand that no matter what, the actions of the United States government imply that he was like, they did what he told them they were going to do.
Right. They fulfilled the prophecy that he was
They
projecting.
fulfilled
It's
the
so weird.
prophecy. They acted in a lot of ways as if they knew. And the only the most obfuscated file in the whole thing is this one that basically admits that they knew where he was going. They were like, wait. When did you figure this out? It's like the guys who were sitting there talking to him about the SEALs go, oh, wait. After like a month of listening to this, we finally get what you're saying. But how did you know this? And here's the thing. That's when he started, because the whole time he's threatening the United States government that those tanks don't mean a thing. First, you got to ask yourself, why were the tanks there? First, you got to ask yourself why they were shooting from helicopters. That's not even allowed because of posse comitatus, right? Unless the compound was involved with drugs, Janet Reno had no reason to go in there with tanks and helicopters. And you can't fire machine guns from helicopters on American citizens. Yet, they shot into his bedroom like they knew where he would be and they wanted him dead.
Mm-hmm.
The whole time he's telling them that those tanks don't mean shit. What he's talking about are Merkaba. When he finally tells them that he has a Merkaba, the whole situation changes. And there's stuff seen being taken out of the compound. I haven't confirmed this because the pictures are blurry. But they thought it was the doors because the doors of the compound had a bunch of bullet holes. And during the trial, they were trying to determine on whether the bullet holes were going in or coming out. Because if they're going in, then that means that the ATF shot first.
Well, at the time, the military, the United States military, was trying to develop their own Merkaba because they were afraid that the Russians were going to do it first.
Yes, and so is actually the Russians are concerned with this whole situation because David Koresh says that the only people who saw him leave to go with the angels to visit God were 2 Russian cosmonauts. Because the cosmonauts at that time, Russia had a bigger presence inside of space. So the angels used them as like a witness to the fact that they had David Koresh. And there's 7 angels seen leaving by these 2 cosmonauts on, I think it's called like Spugent 7 or something. You can look up the history about these 2 Russian cosmonauts were up in a space station by themselves. They see 7 angels pace by their station for like 10 minutes, leave for a certain amount of time, then come back and then leave again.
Hey, did Koresh predict the branch Covidians?
Covidians?
Yeah, because I remember when they were taking over.
7. Those guys were grounded.
The coincidence sync because they experienced something and he experienced something and it happened at the same time. So
and he went back, and there's quite a few things, including scientific things that he has said that I have like charted, and like this. I think he said this to the FBI guys multiple times, and they had no idea what he was talking about.
Angel-like manifestations outside Soviet atheist astronaut craft. I mean, it's an interesting story, even without Koresh. So, I mean, that's their interpretation of it. He's not even speaking for them when they say that they saw angelic beings. Yeah, it's supposed to be
the only thing is
July 12th, 1984, right?
Right,
so,
but he says it was 1985, and there's a lot of speculation on whether or not the Russians were lying the whole time, because the Russians were not happy with that. They, like I said, they grounded those cosmonauts because the cosmonauts wouldn't stop talking about it in religious terms.
I mean, religious. Oh, remember, like, wasn't there also like so like L. Ron Hubbard style, the cosmonauts stated the angels had a wingspan akin to the size of 747 jets and were 80 feet tall. The whole thing to me sounds particularly, I don't know, Scientology, Koreshianity, all of these religions kind of blue beam, sure, but more because the fact that
we got a big bad problem with blue
beam.
because that's basically what he says is in the Bible. Like, people don't realize that the whole Werner von Braun thing revolves around them running out of things to threaten us with. But the Bible basically states that Judgment Day is an alien invasion. It says not only did God make the planet, but God makes the constellations and comes from Orion. We're actually in the constellation of Orion. I checked it out. People don't understand that. And anyway, that's what they're saying, is that the aliens, like,
dude,
bro,
did you hold on, dude, did you read
Judgment Day is an invasion. Judgment Day is basically the first Avengers movie, but we don't have the Avengers, bro.
Dude, did you read Alan Abades's Green's take on Orion and 9/11 and how we were what was happening that day in regards to Orion at that exact moment when the planes hit the towers? Do you know about this? It's on.
I know he knows a lot about Orion.
Yeah, but no, this is like, I can't do this anywhere near justice. There's an always record where we went over it, but like he wrote this crazy piece on what was happening with Orion on that day. I can't do it, but yeah, I thought maybe you had read it, but yeah.
No,
Wow.
I mean, I've talked to him about Orion, and he pointed out that, like, on the Prince of Peace, when God's hand comes out, it comes out of like Orion. And there's words and planets and stuff like that that are mentioned in like the book of Job that we don't even know the definition of. See, that's the fucking weird thing, is all of these Branch Davidians were using like correspondences. Oh, what is it called? There's like a.
I just want to say it's cool that in 2011, Alan did the Grok on Green on Grok, the talk, because I feel like that today with X and Twitter and Grok, you know, he's kind of that sync is going to be a lot more relevant. It's a preemptive, premeditated sync. But yeah, sorry, I can go continue.
He's full of those. He had what was it, that show that was called Touch, where they just totally lifted his artwork for the advertising of the show, and like, I mean, maybe it was a sync, but
than people give him credit for.
Hell yeah, dude.
Of course,
Alan's a very like there's not a single sync head that could have like produced the sync book. And there's a lot of them that would have made it about him. You know what I'm saying? They would have made it about themselves. I don't think in any way, shape, or form Alan ever did that. I feel like everything Alan did was right out in the open. In fact, a lot of people went against him because he was too free with information. Like, we would have conversations that were like business meetings, and then he would put those business meetings out.
Right.
And like there really wasn't any Oz behind the curtain. However, of course, the most of the viral shows that you see on YouTube about synchromysticism are always talking about how suspect synchromysticism is. But bro,
right.
We're a bunch of fucking misfits, bro.
Speaking of synchromysticism, just the word grok, I went down this long rabbit hole where this comes from. The guy, the science fiction writer, The Moon is a Mean Mistress, Heinlein, Anson Heinlein.
Yeah, Stranger in Strangeland. Have you read the book? It's so good.
Who, and that's where the word grok comes from, to mean to fully understand a thing, right? He was also contemporary in some ways to L. Ron Hubbard. He was contemporary to Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov actually called him a flaming liberal. That is a direct quote from Isaac Asimov about this guy that came up with this concept of grok. He also was in the heart of Greenwich Village in the 1930s, which is the same time that the Aldous Huxley's research assistant that was working on a movie for RKO that later became The Seventh Victim and The Cat People. This is all the exact same circle, and we're still referencing their creations, even like right now. It is like one of the most modern things.
Right, but you know why Elon chose it is because it's The Martian. So it's the Martian cult leader showing them the ways where under
Or it could be the Satan thing too, David.
Well, I mean, that's in Stranger in Strangeland. It's the Martian. He groks, like that's the whole premise. So he's got the whole Mars deal, like as far as I can tell. And it's very relatable to the Koresh thing, because what happens to the cult leader, the Martian cult leader, at the end of Stranger in Strangeland, where he gets assassinated, They take him out, and then he's like martyred. It's a whole cult leader
Well, there's
martyred.
I don't
I think that's also
understand
he's
the
trying to
symbol of
talk about
martyrdom.
like the cost. Heinlein's talking about the cost of fascism or federalism, collectivism, is that you're going to have to sacrifice some of your preferences and customizations in order to have a more inclusive fascism, right? But that's the cost of it being an inclusive international socialism or international fascistic empire. It has to go beyond your own clan. It has to be all these other clans that can work together. So everyone loses a sense of self in that, and has to embrace and accept things that they otherwise would be repulsed by, right?
Word. What is going on with you and Alex right now? You're asking him about the number 89, and
I was gonna do it. I was gonna pull him in. I'm not sure if he wants to talk about it. I'm just gonna quote him on it. That's the next subject. You guys want to jump to the next thing? The Doomsday Clock. The Doomsday Clock.
Yes, please.
Judgment Day.
All right, let me just wait. Did Alex say he's coming? Because I wasn't.
Is
sure
it
yet.
really the next subject? No, I didn't see the very last message, but yeah. I mean, I'm saying, is it really the next subject? Like, sounds like it's a subject to me, but yeah, continue.
Well, okay, so the Doomsday Clock just set at 89 seconds to midnight. Do you guys know what the Doomsday Clock is? I don't really know what the Doomsday Clock is. Apparently,
Everybody's seen Watchmen, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I get that there is. I now get that there is a Doomsday Clock. Like, I understand that now. But who made the Doomsday
I think it was in the
Clock
60s.
Did it start in the 60s?
Maybe 50. I mean, it's a big deal in Watchmen, the graphic novel.
Doomsday Clock is a symbol that represents the estimated likelihood of a human-made global catastrophe in the opinions of the members of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. That's what I was looking for. I was looking at who would go and make such a June 1947. Oh boy,
that's why it's in Watchmen, I guess, because of Dr. Manhattan. The whole
on the eye. Look at this. Even the symbolism of it starts to stick out so much more. The eye and the pillar, and look at the sexuality of the symbolism. Crazy. So, created by Oppenheimer, Einstein, and Eugene Rabinovich, the main and maintained since 1947. The clock is a metaphor, not a prediction, for the threats of humanity from unchecked scientific and technological advances. So scientists moved the clock. It was moved to 150 seconds, 2 minutes and 30 seconds from Doomsday in 2017. The clock's original setting in 1947 was 7 minutes to midnight. And then it was set backwards 8 times and forwards 18 times. The furthest back from midnight was 17 minutes from Doomsday in 1991. And the nearest is 89 seconds, set January 25.
Oh, is that why you're asking about 89?
That's why, because 89 seconds, that's how close we are to Doomsday all of a sudden, according to these stooge Meshuggahs here.
Hey, that's funny. We were just talking about Alan Abadessa Green, 89, 17, right? If you add 8 plus 9. I don't know. He's obsessed with the number 17. And he has
Yeah. And so is Q. That was one of the things I was like, I know you hate QAnon, but they have a lot in common with you, Alan. They love the same number as you. Like, it's the same. Like, I mean, what do you want me to do? What can I say?
Fixated on it for different reasons, but it's
reason.
Bizarro.
What kind of a sinkhead needs reason?
Q is the bizarro Alan, because Alan's all about transparency, and
like the number 42 has like 700 reasons. It doesn't matter. Like, the fact of the matter is like, it's a thing. In fact, the more people have different reasons, the more it's a thing. Like, and then at that point, you don't even like consider the reasons. You just take it out as like, there's that thing again. But I mean, like Crowley said, like, all numbers are limitless, right? Like, all numbers are infinite, which I've always taken.
Crowley didn't say that. Iowa said that.
Oh, well, you get that's fair. I'll allow it.
Alex says that 89 seconds equals 2136 frames of film. 89 seconds also equals 1 minute 29 seconds, or 129, which mirrored is 921. 9 seconds 21 frames equals 237 frames. That's his thought, maybe. So there's a Kubrick. It all gets back to Kubrick one way or another. I don't know. But the idea of the Doomsday Clock moving to 89 seconds. So in other words, Trump has moved the Doomsday Clock closer. Is there belief that this timeline, this world, we're closer to a Doomsday? what do you think that means, even relevant to Oppenheimer's Gita quote, that we're maybe breaking, like the breakaway civilization singularity or something? Like, what is doomsday? Does doomsday have to be such a bad thing? I know it sounds, I feel like a CNN reporter.
Well, Iron Maiden made it sound cool, but for them it was 2 minutes to midnight, and now I guess we've inched closer.
Well, we're also using things like, we're using terms as though they're all synonymous. So if you say apocalypse, if you say what's the other, rapture, like rapture and apocalypse, etymologically, like the words themselves aren't really. Oh, what you got something you want to add to reveal?
To reveal. I'll tell you something that has been.
He's busted open the seals.
Demi Moore. Sorry.
Koresh makes it plain that in the Bible there's multiple prophecies, and the same way in that God prophesies that Nebuchadnezzar was going. I think it was Nebuchadnezzar. There's one point where God says, "I'm going to destroy you guys," and then decided not to destroy them. So there's two outcomes to Judgment Day. One is the invasion. The other one is basically called the marriage of the bride and the bridegroom, which means that humanity becomes God or is married to the images of God. This is in the Bible outside of Koresh, but it took me investigating it to realize that what he was saying. There's a lot in like the Book of Philip and stuff of that nature that talks about the combination of the sexes. And in fact, it's in Matthew 26, talks about how like when they're trying to catch Jesus in a lie, they ask if a woman is widowed and the husband had a brother, she marries the brother. If she marries 7, you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Who will the wife be married to on Judgment Day? And he was like, there will be no weddings on Judgment Day. You're not like, and which goes back to what they said in Noah, that on the day of Noah, they were giving in marriage and having marriage, and that day they didn't. Judgment Day is supposed to be the same way. But if you look at it, there's a lot of talk about you can't go up into heaven unless you're complete, and it takes a mate to become complete. The idea of us mating God and us being God, as we're sexually compatible with God, and that there's female angels and stuff of that nature, like that whole idea of we're in the image.
Female angels? I mean, aren't they completely asexual? Isn't
yes,
that the point in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah when they're trying to rape the angels? That
not the hot ones.
No,
some of these 80-foot tall ones seem to do with cosmonaut spaceships, man.
Right.
There's multiple angels, okay?
Sure.
We can take a clue from the angel of Gabriel because his name actually means man of God. And when he appears, there's no wings present. He's just a man. In other stories like Sodom and Gomorrah and things of those natures, when the angels go into town, they're confused with people. Right. And those people try to have sex with those angels because angels have sex. Now, and the Seventh-day Adventists have more individuals than David Koresh. In fact, that they had 6 different individuals before David. In fact, David is considered to be the 7th angel. What the word angel means is that each one of those individuals in the Adventists claim to have, or claim that others that came before them had interactions with angels. David says he has interactions with angels. Lois Roden, who came before David, and the tale goes that David got her pregnant when she was like post-menopause. She actually took a test that showed that she was pregnant, which is what got David Koresh to take over her spot as the new prophet, because the baby was miscarriage. Therefore, she was not worthy. He was worthy. So David Koresh didn't even just have sex with underage girls. He had sex with whoever God told him to. But I'll go on.
I feel like I remember you in Life of Brian when it's panning along before we get to Terry Gilliam with the red shit all over his face. Like you had a soapbox and you were,
It's important to understand that Lois Roden says that she saw an angel outside of her window and that angel had sex in the way that it was female. So the angel had a gender. Now, that was like a huge deal because I think it's funny. We talk about female godheads all the time. Like as sync heads, we take all female godheads as one female godhead, and we kind of like mix and match them, whether it be Kali or anything like that. But as
Or
far as
you,
like
maybe.
the Christian canon goes, that her saying that she saw an angel and that an angel had sex is a big deal.
And
But
she
if you
was
go
also
back and
like
check
60,
her,
right?
that's what it says.
She was
Huh?
like 60 around this time when Lewis.
I have
Road
no. I
met
just found
Koresh.
out about her angel sighting. I swear to.
Oh, you've been silenced.
It's because we brought up Omicron Leonis, the
That'll do it.
constellation of Omicron. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You back yet? Come on, Will. You doing all right? Okay. You're muted, bro. What happened to your cable?
Muted, dog.
Are you trying to pantomime now?
You
Are
know,
you doing like
you handle that mic so much. Maybe that's
Bro.
part of it. I don't know.
bro?
no.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get into the Gnostic meta egg that is Will, by the way, while he's fixing his cable, you keep working on that, Will. I'll just keep pumping you up. A man who lets other people talk, even if it's not his choice. Will, he has this great channel. Hey, there it is. I hear you. Are you back? Is that it?
That was
Okay.
that was worth a laugh.
There's other people I deal with, which are harder to deal with than you. Right? That's one of the ways I introduce you.
Hey,
Easier
didn't-
person to deal with than you think.
Will, didn't you call it meta egg like shortly before Zuck called his thing meta?
Oh,
like
yeah.
like-
In fact, I had this whole video about when I did Paul Bettany, and I tried to call Paul Bettany's like sync web. I tried to rebrand it up underneath this idea of like a metaverse. And I had this whole thing. I was in front of the green screen and I'm like, ha ha, Paul Bettany, metaverse. I just made a hashtag. Hashtag.
Destroy his cable again. For the love of God. I was meta bro for a minute because I didn't really acknowledge that Andreas Xirtus was already a decent enough name for a YouTube channel. So I just thought, well, you need something different. Meta bro 420. That'll be me. I'll just drive around in Los Angeles in yellow
dabs.
traffic. Yeah, basically. That could have been. There's another timeline where that happened. You know.
Well, you gotta understand also that meta egg is a symbol for
Holy God, what have you done, bro? Oh my God, I kind of like it. It's so painful. It's new. It's different.
you isolated it. Have you got effects?
Would you like fries with that?
God
Dude,
did
you
that.
sound like you sound
did
that you sound
God
like
didn't do that, you did it.
Goebbels
You-
on the radio.
Somebody just supersized Will.
You sound like a BBC in the 40s. Like it's not pleasant.
I don't know what's happening.
Oh, there you go.
Wait, now you're just really petite, a little silent there. But well, all right. Let me just say we're gonna do it again. Will, you should definitely come back. Everyone in the meantime can check out his channel. He had a pretty good video recently with Ted Han, the Philip K. Dick, Hermetic Philip K. Dick, and you've been doing a cool series with Frank Zero. Frank Zero just reached out. I think you got a new phone, so we should do something with Frank again pretty soon as well. But you did a Star Wars Santa video, and you've been doing some.
I need to get on the ball and do a video with Paranoid American about
I would watch that. I would watch that for sure.
a Space Odyssey. Or not a Space
Why
Odyssey.
haven't we invited Andros?
Because Andros had a falling out with me. I never had a falling out with Andros.
Oh, really?
Andros, but he had a falling out with me. Yeah.
Let me
It's a
fix
whole
that
long
somehow.
story.
I have enough
luck.
narcissism to believe
let's
that I'm.
unprolapse that friendship.
Yeah, you know,
I've
like-
talked to him about it. If you want to talk to me about that, David, on the side, I can because I mean, Andros and I are pretty close as far as like, and I've talked to him about you and so forth, and I know how he feels. But I don't know if you agree with how he feels. It's just gonna. I mean, I was there for that whole thing. I was thinking about earlier today how special the Sync Summits up were in Olympia,
Exactly.
because us getting together kind of like it makes you feel less lonely when this stuff when everybody's around and everybody's agreeing on what's happening. You know.
Yeah, you're a bunch of hobby philosophers. Exactly. You gotta get your coffee culture. It's important.
Totally.
I mean, yeah. So like, let's send some love his way, even with that. But in the meantime, also let me say you got to go to David Charles Plate, MK Ultrasound 723. Check out the most recent highlight is Midsommar with Tool. I actually love this movie. It's really hardcore. experience. I'm not sure if you're all ready for it, but if you aren't, even still, I would say watching the sync first then is fine. It'll probably make the movie more bearable. There's something less painful about any movie when David syncs it. And then you could also check out Holy Mountain with Hollywood, which is one of my favorite syncs. This is one I watch this one relatively commonly. It's like pretty much the way I watch Holy Mountain now is to watch the David sync. So you should check that out. And yeah, anything else you want to point out, David, in the meantime?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, pretty soon here, I need to talk to you, Thomas, about maybe putting some artwork that I've been printing and using a heat press with like this like G clay with like gloss laminate.
No, we talked about that. I actually think a great idea would be to fast track the Golden Bough comic and make some of those exclusives for like the super backers that both want the first sync comic ever to exist and also get some like very limited edition personal glissés.
Golden Bough Gaza condoms.
Yeah.
One of the tiers should have.
We will actually fly by and drop a whole bunch of Gaza condoms on your house at certain tiers.
Cool. Yeah. No, I'm open to discuss different possibilities for that. Yeah, but they look really nice. I think I got a project.
Aloha. And then so paranoidamerican.com, where you get all your finest Paranoid American comic books. You can get Never a Straight Answer. You can get some soul patch that goes with your jacket. You can look up MK Ultra. You can explain to your girlfriend how San Francisco used to be and why it's back that way now because of the CIA. And then you can even set up for the Titanic conspiracy, because some of you might be sitting somewhere at a restaurant one night having an icebreaker with some lady and saying, hey, did you know that the Titanic was, a conspiracy? And they're like, well, boy, do I. And then you can explain about the Irish and JP Morgan, and you can show the pictures. You can pull this right out of your wallet right next to the place where your picture of your child should be instead of the picture of your cat.
And more importantly, the success of this, which is at titaniccomic.com, and the one at satanicpaniccomic.com, the result of both of those are what's going to allow us to end up making the Golden Bough comic that I've been working on with David. So these are the next two likely to launch. I also have a Bigfoot one at doesbigfootexist.com. Once those things are in production and like getting printed, that's when the Golden Bough comic that me and Dave have been talking about also enters production and starts getting artwork done.
These are the first 2 degrees of entered paranoia and master American, if you will, if you want, or initiated American, I guess, before you get to Masonic American. But the point is, you can get to the 3rd degree if you just get to the first 2. I hope you guys take the time to like look into the Satanic Panic. This is a good comic book to have and an important comic book to share. That's the way I would put it. Make sure that you get yourself a copy. Do it while it's cheaper, because if you get yourself in right now, then you get all this cool swag with it. You can like pay a little extra to get all this cool swag with it, and you save some money and you get like a couple copies.
Yeah, anyone that's followed along with one of these campaigns knows by now the last one, the Illuminati comic one, was phenomenal. So people that backed it in one of these campaigns aren't just getting the book. They're getting like challenge coins and shirts and towels and tumblers and like all kinds of cool stuff that otherwise would never exist.
There's a reason why people love this man. He makes some of the greatest merchandise in the world. It's an honor to be friends with such a grifter. I really love you, Thomas. You're a genius. Get yourself a McDrenochrome t-shirt. Do it. Do it. And then, you can find me at, what should I do? Andreas.me, Xirtus.com. It doesn't really matter. Wherever you go, you'll find more videos. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching our show. And I hope that you all are alive next week. God bless you. What do you want? Anyone else? You have a better ending than that? No, that's all you get. Goodbye.